The 48 Laws of Power, by Robert Greene. Introduction. In the year 1661, a man named Nicolas Fouquet stood at the very peak of his world. As the finance minister to the young King Louis XIV of France, he was brilliant, indispensable, and fabulously wealthy. But he sensed the king's favor was beginning to wane. And so, to win back his master's heart, Fouquet decided to throw the most spectacular party the world had ever seen. He hosted it at his magnificent new chateau, a palace so grand it would later inspire Versailles itself. The guests were the most brilliant minds and nobles of Europe. The food was exotic, things no one in France had ever tasted. A new play by the great Molière debuted that night, and the gardens were lit by a fireworks display that turned the evening sky into a canvas of impossible colors. Fouquet floated through the party, believing that every new spectacle, every gasp of delight from the guests, was a testament to his loyalty and his value to the king. He thought he was showing his devotion. He thought he was making himself indispensable. But as King Louis watched, something else was happening. He saw his own subjects, his own friends, looking at his finance minister with more awe and admiration than they had ever shown him. He saw a man who wasn't just paying tribute, but who was flaunting his wealth, his taste, his power. The party wasn't a gift, it was a challenge. The very next day, Nicolas Fouquet was arrested. He would spend the last 20 years of his life in a solitary prison cell, never again to see the world he had tried so hard to conquer. His crime? He had outshone the master. This story isn't just a historical anecdote. It's a warning. It's the very first lesson in a book that has been called dangerous, brilliant, evil, and essential. A book that has been quietly passed from hand to hand in boardrooms, locker rooms, and corridors of power for over 2 decades. That book is The 48 Laws of Power. Written by Robert Greene, a man who has dedicated his life to studying the timeless strategies of history's greatest players, from Machiavelli to Sun Tzu, from Queen Elizabeth I to Henry Kissinger. This book is not a gentle guide to getting along with people. It is a brutally honest manual on the art of human interaction, in a world where everyone, whether they admit it or not, is playing the game of power. It has sold millions of copies, been translated into dozens of languages, and has become a kind of secret handshake for those who want to understand the hidden currents that shape our lives. So why should you, at this stage in your life, venture into such a controversial book? Because the world is, as Greene describes it, a giant, scheming court. And whether you want to play the game or not, you are already on the board. Power is not good or evil. It is simply a tool. And it is far better to be the artist who masters that tool than the bungler who is crushed by it. By the end of our time together today, you will not just have learned a few of these laws. You will have gained a new lens through which to see the world. You will understand why some people seem to rise effortlessly while others get stuck, why some plans succeed and others fail, and why the most important moves are often the ones made in silence. This isn't just about gaining power, it's about protecting yourself from it. It's about learning the rules of a game you are already playing. So, let's begin. Book summary. The first thing you have to understand, and this is the foundation for everything that follows, is that power is not about aggression or force. It's a game of appearances, a subtle art of maneuvering. And the first person you must learn to control isn't your rival or your boss. It's yourself. The greatest barrier to power is your own emotional response to things. Think about it. When someone insults you, your first instinct is to get angry. When you want something, your first instinct is to show your desire. But emotions cloud your reason. Anger, Greene tells us, is the most destructive emotion of all, because it makes you predictable. Your enemy can easily push your buttons and make you react in a way that serves their purpose, not yours. This brings us to one of the most fundamental laws. Always say less than necessary. When you are trying to impress people, the more you say, the more common you appear, and the less in control. Louis XIV, the same king who threw Nicolas Fouquet in prison, was a master of this. As a young man, he was known to be quite talkative. But once he became king, he adopted a strategy of extreme taciturnity. Ministers would spend days debating an issue, then present their arguments to him. Louis would listen in silence, with an enigmatic look on his face, and when they were finished, he would simply say, "I shall see," and that was it. No one ever knew where he stood. They couldn't predict his reactions. And in their nervousness to fill the silence, they would reveal their own weaknesses, their own plans, their own anxieties, all of which Louis would later use against them. Your silence makes people uncomfortable. They are machines of interpretation, and they will rush to interpret your silence, often revealing far more about themselves than you ever could have learned by asking questions. Saying less also makes you appear more profound and mysterious. Your short, vague answers will be pondered for days. People will credit you with an intelligence and power you may not even have. As the artist Andy Warhol once realized, "I learned that you actually have more power when you shut up." And of course, the less you say, the less risk you run of saying something foolish or dangerous. Remember the Russian rebel Kondratij Ryleyev. Sentenced to death, he stood on the gallows, the noose around his neck. When the trapdoor opened, the rope broke, and he crashed to the ground. In those days, such an event was seen as a sign from heaven, and the condemned was almost always pardoned. As Ryleyev got to his feet, bruised but alive, he couldn't resist a sarcastic comment to the crowd. "You see, in Russia they don't even know how to make rope." A messenger rushed to the Tsar with the news. The Tsar, annoyed but bound by tradition, began to sign the pardon. But then he asked, "Did Ryleyev say anything after this miracle?" The messenger reported his little joke. "In that case," said the Tsar, "let us prove the contrary," and he tore up the pardon. The next day, Ryleyev was hanged again. This time, the rope did not break. Once the words are out, you cannot take them back. Keep them under control. This control over your own tongue is part of a larger theme: controlling appearances. How people see you is everything. Your reputation, for instance, is the cornerstone of your power. It's something you must guard with your life. Think of the great Chinese general Zhuge Liang, known as the Sleeping Dragon. His reputation for being a master of deception was so powerful it was like a weapon in itself. Once, he was resting in a small town with only a handful of soldiers when he learned that a massive enemy army, over 150,000 strong, was approaching. Escape was impossible. Instead of panicking, Liang ordered his men to throw open the city gates, take down their flags, and hide. He then sat on the most visible part of the city wall, lit some incense, and began to play his lute and chant. When the enemy general, Sima Yi, arrived and saw this scene, he stopped his entire army. He knew Zhuge Liang. He knew his reputation for setting elaborate traps. An empty city with open gates, with his rival calmly playing music on the wall? This had to be a trick. The situation was so obviously a trap that Sima Yi, for a brief moment, considered that it might not be a trap, that Liang was actually helpless. But the fear that Liang's reputation inspired was too great. He dared not risk it. He ordered an immediate and speedy retreat. That is the power of reputation. It can make a vast army flee without a single arrow being fired. But this game of appearances has its dangers. The same desire that makes you want to build a great reputation can also lead you to make the mistake of Nicolas Fouquet. You can become so eager to display your talents that you make your superiors feel insecure. And this brings us back to that very first law: Never outshine the master. It's a common misperception to believe that by displaying your gifts, you are winning your master's affection. He may pretend to appreciate it, but at the first opportunity, he will replace you with someone less intelligent, less attractive, and less threatening. This doesn't mean you should be incompetent. It means you must be subtle. If you are more intelligent than your master, seem the opposite. Make him appear more intelligent than you. Act naive. Make it seem that you need his expertise. Commit harmless mistakes that give you the chance to ask for his help. Masters adore such requests. If your ideas are more creative, ascribe them to him, in as public a manner as possible. Make it clear that your advice is merely an echo of his. Galileo learned this lesson perfectly. For years, he depended on the generosity of various patrons to support his research. He would give one a military compass he invented, dedicate a book to another. It was a life of constant insecurity. Then, in 1610, he discovered the moons of Jupiter. Instead of dividing this discovery among his patrons, he decided to focus exclusively on the Medici family. The Medici had made Jupiter, the mightiest of the gods, their family symbol. So Galileo brilliantly turned his discovery into a cosmic event honoring the Medici's greatness. He announced that the 4 moons represented Cosimo de' Medici II and his 3 brothers, orbiting their father, the founder of the dynasty, just as the moons orbited Jupiter. He was saying that the heavens themselves reflected the glory of the Medici family. He didn't make them feel intellectually inferior, he made them shine brilliantly among the courts of Italy. He didn't outshine the master, he made the master outshine all others. The result? Cosimo II made Galileo his official court philosopher and mathematician, with a full salary. The days of begging for patronage were over. This leads us to a fundamental question of power. If you have to be so careful with your superiors, who can you trust? Surely, your friends. Right? Wrong. This is the hard lesson of law too. Never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. It's natural to want to hire your friends. The world is a harsh place, and friends soften it. The problem, Greene says, is that you often don't know your friends as well as you imagine. Friendship is often built on avoiding arguments and covering up unpleasant qualities. When you hire a friend, your act of kindness unbalances the relationship. They may feel they haven't earned their position, that it's a form of charity. This creates a secret resentment. Flashes of envy will appear. And before you know it, the friendship fades, replaced by a sense of obligation and bitterness. Ingratitude has a long and deep history. Consider the story of the Byzantine Emperor Michael III. Young and inexperienced, he needed a loyal counselor. He chose his best friend, Basilius, a man he had raised from being a simple stable boy to the head of the royal stables, a man who owed him everything. Ignoring the advice of others, he made Basilius his chief chamberlain. Basilius learned well, but he also developed a taste for power and money. Michael gave him everything he wanted, even marrying him off to his own mistress. But it was never enough. Basilius then convinced Michael that his own uncle, Bardas, was a threat. Michael, under his friend's influence, had his uncle murdered. Basilius was then promoted to head of the army. A few years later, Michael, now in financial trouble, asked Basilius to pay back some of the money he had borrowed. Basilius refused, with a look of such impudence that the emperor suddenly realized the monster he had created. The former stable boy was now more powerful than the emperor himself. A few weeks later, soldiers, led by Basilius, stabbed the emperor to death. Basilius proclaimed himself emperor, riding through the streets brandishing the head of his former benefactor and best friend on the end of a long pike. So, what's the alternative? An enemy. A former enemy, Greene argues, will be more loyal than a friend, because he has more to prove. He doesn't expect favors, so he is grateful for anything he gets. Abraham Lincoln understood this perfectly. During the Civil War, an elderly lady chastised him for not calling the Southerners irreconcilable enemies who must be destroyed. "Why, madam," Lincoln replied, "do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" By working with a former enemy, your relationship is based on mutual self-interest, not unstable emotions. This doesn't mean you should go around making enemies. But if you have them, find a way to use them. And if you have no enemies, Greene adds cheekily, find a way to make them. Without a worthy opponent, we grow lazy. An enemy at our heels sharpens our wits, keeping us focused and alert. Now, whether you're dealing with a friend, an enemy, or a superior, the key to influencing them is almost never direct confrontation. The most powerful moves are indirect. You want to seduce people into moving in your direction, not force them. And to do that, you must work on the hearts and minds of others. People are emotional creatures. If you ignore their psychology, their individual likes and dislikes, they will grow to hate you. Marie Antoinette is the classic example of someone who failed to understand this. She felt the people owed her their affection simply because she was queen. She never made any effort to understand them, to tour the provinces, or even to mingle with Parisians. She lived in her own bubble, a world of lavish gowns and a fantasy peasant village at the Petit Trianon. This insensitivity made her the focus of the entire country's resentment. When the revolution came, not a soul came to her defense. Compare this to the Chinese strategist Zhuge Liang. When facing the barbarian King Menguo, he had the opportunity to crush him and his army. But he knew that would only create resentment. Instead, he captured Menguo 7 times, and 7 times he released him. He treated the captured soldiers with respect, feeding them and sending them home to their families. He wasn't just fighting a war, he was battling for their hearts. By the 7th capture, Menguo and his people were so moved by Liang's mercy that they yielded completely, becoming his most loyal allies. It is better to win hearts, Liang was told, than cities. Part of working on hearts and minds is understanding what truly motivates people. Don't bother reminding them of your past assistance or good deeds. That just makes them feel obligated and resentful. Instead, as Law 13 says, when asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. Find something in your request that will benefit them, and emphasize it out of all proportion. The Athenians understood this when the island of Corcyra came to them for help against Corinth. The Corinthians gave a passionate speech about their past friendship and all the favors they had done for Athens. The Corcyrans, on the other hand, admitted they had no ties of friendship. All they could offer was an alliance of mutual self-interest. Their powerful navy combined with Athens's would create an unstoppable force. The Athenians, being realists, overwhelmingly voted to ally with Corcyra. Self-interest is the lever that will move people. Once you make them see how you can meet their needs or advance their cause, their resistance will magically fall away. This leads us to an even more powerful form of indirect action: getting people to do your work for you. Law 7 tells us, get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. Think of the rivalry between Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Tesla was a brilliant, once-in-a-generation mind. Edison was more of a businessman and a publicist. He once said he had no need to be a mathematician because he could always hire one. And that was his method. He hired the best in the field to do the work for him, then slapped his own name on the patent. If he had to, he would steal from his competitors. And whose name is better known today? Edison knew that the credit for a creation is often more important than the creation itself. you must be vigilant and ruthless in securing that credit for yourself. If you try to do everything on your own, you'll burn yourself out like Tesla, who died in poverty while others got rich from his inventions. It is far better to conserve your forces, find people with the skills you lack, and find a way to make their work your own. This doesn't just apply to living people. You can use the vast storehouse of knowledge from the past. Isaac Newton called this standing on the shoulders of giants. Shakespeare borrowed plots and dialogue from Plutarch. Their skill was in transforming the work of others into something new, something that bore their own unique stamp. An even more subtle way to get others to work for you is to make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. When you force the other person to act, you are the one in control. It's always better to make your opponent come to you, abandoning his own plans in the process. Think of the master manipulator, Talleyrand. When Napoleon was exiled to the island of Elba, everyone was nervous. But Talleyrand seemed calm. He knew that Napoleon, left so close to Europe, was a ticking time bomb. But instead of arguing to have him moved farther away, he did the opposite. Working quietly, he and other European ministers baited Napoleon into escaping. They sent visitors to tell him how popular he still was in France. They even tipped him off that the English would let him go. Napoleon, whose ego and ambition were his greatest weaknesses, fell for the trap. He escaped, marched on Paris, and reclaimed his throne for a glorious 100 days. But Talleyrand knew France was exhausted and bankrupt. He knew Napoleon would be forced into a war he couldn't win. And a few months later, at Waterloo, Napoleon was defeated for good. This time, he was exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he had no hope of escape. Talleyrand had set the trap, baited it with the promise of glory, and let his opponent walk right into it, destroying himself. As Talleyrand had foreseen, the aggressive person is rarely in full control. He is constantly reacting to events, and his energy is turned against him. By making your enemy come to you, you force him to operate on your territory, on your terms. Perhaps the most sophisticated form of this indirect power is to control the options, get others to play with the cards you deal. The best deceptions are the ones that seem to give the other person a choice. They feel they are in control, but they are actually your puppets. Give people options that come out in your favor, whichever one they choose. Put them on the horns of a dilemma. They are gored wherever they turn. Ivan the Terrible was a master of this. Facing rebellion from the powerful boyar class, he knew that fighting a civil war would destroy Russia. So he did something completely unexpected. He packed up his treasures, left the Kremlin, and abdicated the throne. For a month, Moscow was plunged into terror and chaos as the boyars ran wild. The people, blaming the boyars, begged Ivan to return. He refused, until finally he offered them a choice. Either they grant him absolute power to govern as he pleased, or he would remain in abdication and let the country descend into anarchy. Faced with this choice, the people chose to give him absolute power. They could no longer complain when he acted like a dictator, because they had given him that power themselves. He didn't force them, he simply controlled their options. When people feel they have a choice, they walk into your trap that much more easily. But what happens when these indirect methods aren't enough? What happens when you are faced with an enemy who simply will not be seduced or maneuvered? This is where the harsher laws come into play. Law 15 is perhaps the most brutal: crush your enemy totally. All great leaders, Greene says, have known that a feared enemy must be crushed completely. If one ember is left alight, a fire will eventually break out. More is lost through stopping halfway than through total annihilation. The enemy will recover and will seek revenge. The Chinese general Shang Yu learned this the hard way. He repeatedly had his rival, Liu Pang, in his grasp. But out of a fatal respect for his former comrade, he hesitated. He showed mercy. Liu Pang, however, was not so sentimental. When the tables were turned, he made a false treaty, slaughtered almost all of Shang Yu's army, and pursued him until the great general took his own life. Liu Pang went on to become one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history, the founder of the Han dynasty. He learned the lesson: reconciliation with a wounded enemy is out of the question. Only one side can win, and it must win totally. This idea of crushing an enemy can be applied more subtly. Instead of crushing the entire group, you can strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Trouble can often be traced to a single strong individual, the stirrer, the arrogant underling. If you allow such people room to operate, others will succumb to their influence. In any group, power is concentrated in the hands of one or two people. Find that person. Isolate them. Banish them. Neutralize their influence. Once the leader is gone, the center of gravity is gone, and everything falls apart. When Pope Boniface VIII wanted to take over the city of Florence, he didn't attack the city directly. He saw that its spirit of resistance was embodied by one man, the poet Dante Alighieri. He laid a trap, luring Dante to Rome for negotiations and keeping him there while his agents in Florence sowed dissension. With its leader and most eloquent voice gone, the city's resistance crumbled. But what if you are the one who is weaker? What if you are the one facing a stronger enemy? Fighting for honor's sake is a fool's game. Law 22 advises, use the surrender tactic. Transform weakness into power. When you are weaker, never fight. Choose surrender instead. Surrender gives you time to recover, time to torment and irritate your conqueror, time to wait for his power to wane. By turning the other cheek, you infuriate and unsettle him. The German writer Bertolt Brecht demonstrated this perfectly. Summoned before the House Un-American Activities Committee, he didn't argue or protest like his colleagues. He was the very picture of congeniality. He smoked a cigar, knowing the chairman was a cigar aficionado. He answered questions politely, but with such ambiguity and wordplay that the committee became baffled. His outward submission made them feel important, but it also made it impossible for them to get angry. They let him go, calling him a good example to the other witnesses. The next day, he left the country, having subtly mocked their authority and preserved his own freedom. This brings us to perhaps the ultimate form of defense and offense: assume formlessness. By taking a shape, by having a visible plan, you open yourself to attack. Instead, keep yourself adaptable and on the move. Be as fluid and formless as water. When the Chinese communists fought the much larger and better equipped nationalist army, they didn't engage in direct battles. They dispersed their forces. They moved like Mercury, harassing, ambushing, retreating, never staying in one place. The nationalists couldn't figure out their strategy. They assumed it was incompetence. But Mao was playing a different game, the game of Wei Qi or Go. He was using the vastness of the country to surround his opponents, not just physically, but mentally. His formlessness disoriented and terrified them, and eventually, their larger, more rigid army collapsed. This brings us to the final, and perhaps most important aspect of power: the image you project. Power is a performance. And the greatest performers create a world of their own. Recreate yourself, says Law 25. Don't accept the roles that society foists on you. Forge a new identity, one that commands attention and never bores the audience. Julius Caesar understood this. He wasn't just a general, he was a showman. He staged extravagant gladiator shows, theatrical contests, and mock naval battles. He was the master of his own image, always aware of his audience. He wore spectacular purple robes, spoke with dramatic flair, and even in death, pulled his gown over his face so he could die with dignity. He understood the vital link between power and theater. This means you must also learn to create compelling spectacles. Striking imagery and grand symbolic gestures create an aura of power. Everyone responds to them. Dazzled by appearances, no one will notice what you are really doing. Diane de Poitiers, the mistress of King Henri II, was a master of this. As she aged, she knew she couldn't rely on her beauty alone. So she identified herself with the Roman goddess Diana, the goddess of the hunt. She rebuilt her castle in the style of a Roman temple, filled it with symbols of the goddess, crescent moons, stags, hounds, and had herself depicted in paintings and sculptures as Diana. She wasn't just an aging mistress, she became a mythic force, a goddess to be worshipped. And Henri worshipped her until the day he died. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you must be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. The way you carry yourself determines how you are treated. If you appear common or vulgar, people will disrespect you. But if you act regally, confident of your powers, you make yourself seem destined to wear a crown. Christopher Columbus was the son of a cheese vendor, but he carried himself with such confidence that he convinced the Queen of Spain to finance his voyage. He didn't just ask for ships, he demanded the title Grand Admiral of the Ocean and to be made viceroy over any lands he discovered. The Queen was so impressed by his boldness that she agreed. It is within your power to set your own price. Ask for little, and that is what you will get. Ask for the moon, and you send a signal that you are worth a king's ransom. And this, in a way, brings us full circle. The game of power begins and ends with you. It is your self-control, your ability to master your emotions, that allows you to play the game with skill. It is the image you create, the confidence you project, that determines how others see you. The world is a stage, and you are both the actor and the director of your own play. You can choose to be a minor character in someone else's drama, or you can write a new script, cast yourself in the lead role, and create a spectacle that no one will ever forget. The choice, as always, is yours. Commentary. So, what are we to make of all this? The 48 Laws of Power is a book that can be deeply unsettling. It pulls back the curtain on the parts of human nature we often prefer not to look at: our desire for control, our capacity for deception, our vulnerability to manipulation. It can feel cynical, even cold-blooded. And yet, I believe that to dismiss it as merely a guide to being evil is to miss the point entirely. Robert Greene is not inventing these laws, he is observing them. He has spent a lifetime studying 3,000 years of history, and what he has found is that these dynamics of power are timeless. They were at play in the courts of ancient China, in Renaissance Italy, and they are at play today in the office, in politics, and even in our personal relationships. To ignore these laws is not to make them go away. It is simply to leave yourself defenseless. It is to walk onto a battlefield unarmed, believing that if you are a good person, no harm will come to you. But the world, as Greene reminds us, is full of people who are not so noble. The real value of this book, especially for someone just starting out, is not as an offensive manual, but as a defensive one. It is a guide to self-preservation. It teaches you to recognize the games being played around you. It gives you a framework for understanding why people act the way they do, why your boss might take credit for your work, why a friend might betray you, why a charismatic leader can make people do irrational things. This book is not about becoming a heartless manipulator. It's about becoming a shrewd observer of human nature. It's about understanding that power is a game, and it is far better to be a master of the game than to be a pawn. So, how can you start applying these lessons today, without becoming a monster? I believe it comes down to 3 simple practices. First, become a better observer of people. This is the foundation of everything. Spend less time talking and more time listening. Watch what people do, not just what they say. Notice the little details, the unconscious gestures. Who do people look at when they speak? Who holds the real influence in a group, beyond the official titles? By becoming a student of human nature, you arm yourself with the most valuable knowledge of all. Second, master your own emotions. This is the most difficult but also the most crucial step. The next time you feel a surge of anger, or defensiveness, or desire, don't just react. Take a step back. Ask yourself, why am I feeling this? Is this emotion serving me, or is it making me a puppet for someone else? The space between an event and your reaction to it is where your power lies. The more you can widen that space, the more control you will have over your own destiny. And third, learn to think a few steps ahead. Most people are trapped in the present moment, reacting to what's right in front of them. The powerful are always thinking about the future. They don't just consider the immediate consequences of their actions, they consider the consequences of those consequences. When you're about to make a decision, don't just think about your next move. Think about the move after that. Think about how your opponent will react, and how you will react to their reaction. This foresight is what separates the masters from the amateurs. We've covered a lot of ground today, and these are powerful, sometimes difficult, ideas. My goal here wasn't to give you a complete playbook, but to open a door. The 48 Laws of Power is not a book you read once, it's a book you live with, a book you return to again and again as you navigate the complexities of life. This summary is just the beginning of that conversation. The real wisdom comes not just from knowing the laws, but from developing the intelligence to know when and how to apply them, and, sometimes, when to break them. Now, we've hit the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you get your hands on the book yourself. It's in those quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with something you're going through in your own life. This journey we took today is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or made you think, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see the world and your place in it. There's a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and want to continue exploring the ideas in some of the most influential books ever written, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It lets me know you're out there, and it ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.